Thank you very much. I enjoyed that very much and I agree with everything you said. So I said before, I'm Anna Simpson. I work for Forum for the Future, and we work with a lot of the companies you mentioned. I'm writing a book about, arguing that in order to have the innovation that you describe, we need to redefine business culture. And so I'd like your views, please, on what sort of culture can enable new ideas to emerge and to thrive. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Vivian. I'm MPB here. I come from China. So my previous working experience is in CSR reporting. So I did some CSR reporting for my clients, including like MNCs and small and medium enterprise in China. But there's a thing that for companies, they are not required to do the reporting as a mandatory purpose for those companies in China. But like in the past 10 years, the Chinese government has implemented like policies like they require a state-owned company to release the CSR report as a mandatory, along with their financial report. So, but for small and medium companies in China, they are still suffering in profit level. Because government in China has emphasized on economic growth a lot. So sometimes we will lacking like environmental sustainable things.
Please, what's your question, please?
So my question is what's your suggestion for do you think it's government's policy can intervene, or do you think it's the corporate's role to implement CSR?
Hello, my name is Martin Stavenhagen. I'm an alumni from the school, but now I work for executive education here at the Lee Kuan Yew School. So my question would be, what do you think? Obviously, there are business schools with executive education programs, and I would have a pretty clear idea of what you might recommend them to teach for more sustainability, considering what you were talking about CSR. What do you think, since executive education teaches mainly policymakers and has short-term courses for people who are actually practicing policy, sometimes business as well, what do you think executive education should teach leaders from the public sector for more sustainability? Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. My name is Nihit. I'm from India. I have two questions. First is on, everyone might agree that the future is our business, but whose business do you think the past is? And what is your opinion on accounting for past emissions? And my second question is, do you have a prediction for the outcome at the COP in Paris this year?
Say it again.
Please,
do you have an opinion on
prediction for what we can expect from the COP at Paris this year?
COP21,
Thank you for your precision. I'm Li Zi from the School of the Design and Environment. And 1.5 years ago, I listened to your two presentation and impressed me a lot. So actually, I do the research and find the sustainable DNA of the companies in China, small company in rural area. So how they can impact the new kind of the internet, like e-commerce, how can impact the new urbanization. So my question is about how do you think about this kind of sustainable DNA impact the rural community, and how they, as you said, like family business, how they really impact this kind of business models. And also I'm very pretty sure I was studying debt. So thank you very much.
I head a CSR department in a local MNC. I wanted to find out what your views are on the Dutch government being sued successfully by an NGO called Agenda for not doing enough. Do you think it will set a trend across Europe or in the more advanced economies, and what would be the impact?
Professor, thank you for the lecture. My name is Angela Chen. I'm a visiting scholar from Lee Kuan School. And I'm particularly interested in the idea of triple helix, that I want to know more about how governments, companies, and knowledge centers cooperate to get the goal of sustainability, because for many times, actually, they have different goals for each one, and for each of them, they have long and short-term goals. So can you provide with us some concrete examples how they cooperate with each other? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 10 people ask about 15 questions.
It's
So
great.
you have about 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think these were great questions. So thanks for that. There's always difficult when you give a speech or a lecture, but it's better to communicate. So I'm very happy with the Q&As, and you raised some very interesting points. First question that was about the business culture. And I'm very glad you made that remark, because culture is about having the right mindset. If sustainability only would be considered as a technique, there's a big risk. Because then it can be a trend, it's nice now, and maybe after 2 years can be something different. When we talk about sustainability, this has a long-term character. When we talk about, let's say, the transition of energy, from coal to gas to renewables, that is a process that will take some decades. That's what you can see. When we talk about cleaning the air, etc., you cannot reach this in 1 week. That's crazy. So sustainability does have a long-term character, and that has to do with culture. There has been a time when I was a student, it was all so much focused on the government, the welfare state. When I studied economic and social history and law. As a lawyer, I learned we have planning, financing, regulation to correct things. But it was a government-oriented approach. Today we understand it's and governments and universities and businesses. You have to work together. But the point is, if the culture is not right, if there's not a sense of responsibility, a sense of sustainability, a sense of corporate responsibility, then you will get difficulties. People like Paul Polman, I mentioned his name, the Unilever CEO, Feike Sijbesma, the CEO of DSM, a chemical company, they've seen the poverty in Africa with their own eyes. They're very concerned about what's happening with the climate change issue. And they say, if we have a responsibility to act, this is a matter of culture. It's in your hearts and minds. And therefore, we also have to speak about what is the culture of our company. That was the reason why I liked having these meetings with Japanese companies, to talk about what are the values of our company. Talk about it. I spoke with a Dutch entrepreneur, and I said, what is your sustainability policy? He said, I send you a document. The first chapter had the title, first the values and then the vision. Because values say a lot about the DNA of your company. The values say something about the question why people want to work for you, or why clients are choosing for your company. So the issue of culture is extremely important. There has been a time that we expected everything from the government in the Western world. In the 80s, suddenly, we had Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. It was Thatcherism, the supply-side economics, and suddenly we expected everything from markets. The government does not lead the solutions, the government is creating difficulties. That was the point. And now we believe everything that is coming from the market, the shareholder values. And later on we saw the difficulties, and then we had more attention for institutions. Talking about having the right business model, etc., that's also a matter of culture. So therefore I fully agree with you that the issue of culture is extremely important. And if you're not willing to talk about values, about the DNA of your company or your institution or organization, then you get difficulties. Second question from Vivian. You spoke about your China experiences, CSR reporting, and the question is, must it be free issue or must it be mandatory? Let me start by saying this. If it's only a matter of the government gives a regulation and you have to do it, there's not much fun for companies. I noticed that in my country. We have seen the development of a new generation of entrepreneurs, CEOs. They have sustainability, your point, in their culture, in their mind. And if you just would say, you just have to do it, they don't like it. They say, no, it must come from within. So I think it starts with the DNA of your company, the values, talking about what does sustainability mean. And then also the willingness to be open and transparent about results, choosing for integrated reporting. That is what should be done in any case. And then the second question is, can governments support this orientation? I would like to use the wording, can you support it? Yes, it can. In Europe, we have a directive of the European Commission, and that is a comply or explain rule. So you have to comply, that means you have to deliver social reporting activities, and if not, you have to explain why you don't do it. You can imagine it's not so nice for a company to explain why you don't do it. So this is an example that you say it can help, can be helpful. Comply or explain rule. We have another instrument. When I was Prime Minister, we started with a transparency benchmark. So we stimulated the companies to be open about their results in the sphere of sustainability. And what you can see now is that companies, they want to have a higher position on that transparency benchmark. So there's also an instrument you can use. So I agree with you, you must try to find the right policy measure of governments to stimulate it. I think we have to do that. In some countries you have, like South Africa, integrated reporting is mandatory. So they've chosen for that rule, we will see what will happen. In any case, governments will stimulate this development. The mainstream must be integrated report and in short or long run. I think it's necessary. You need openness. And therefore, you have to talk about government interventions. I've given some examples that could be workable. Third question that had to do with education. What to teach the leaders and what to teach also the public sector. Very good question. It's really key to talk about education. When you talk about business schools, if you are only teaching in a traditional way, management theories, financial schemes, etc., that will not lead to the creativity we need. That is when we have new auditors in my company in EY. Use them, give a speech for them. And of course, I always ask the question, has sustainability in your curriculum? The first question. The second question is, what have you learned about integrated reporting? I must say, I'm always disappointed when I receive the answers. We are not yet there. We have to do much more. Be honest about it. So you have to talk about business schools, about education, to do things in another way. So for auditors, that means you must know much more about integrated reporting. The business schools must talk about sustainability, how to integrate in business models, what about creativity, what about the business case of sustainability models. All these things should be on the agenda. And talking about leaders in the public sector, I think things have changed. The traditional welfare state approach faded in fact a bit away. We can see also the loss of the importance of nation states. You can see supranational arrangements and more decentral arrangements. So it's also interesting to see what leadership needs in the public sector. And sometimes you need regulation, and sometimes you need financial instruments, and sometimes you must be a partner in a network. So you have to redefine the role of governments. And I think we have great civil servants. In my country, I met fantastic young people. They said, I want to work in the public sector. And these guys want to be creative people. So also if you talk about leadership of those guys, they must have also the right education. Fourth question. You referred about the past and about COP. First point, the past. It's good to talk about what happened in earlier days. When we talk about pollution, for example, I think a lot of damage has been caused by Western companies. And in the West, and in other parts of the world. It's true. That's also the reason when we talk about financing the climate policy, you can ask from the Western countries to pay more. And I agree with that because it's necessary. But it's not the whole story. When we talk about CO2 emissions at this moment, China produces more CO2 than the US and European countries combined. And it's a bit remarkable that a country like China is active everywhere in the world. They have all the natural resources in Africa. But when we talk about financing the climate policy, then you don't know, we're a third world country. And that cannot be the case. So be honest about it. So I think you have to talk about what happened in the past, why went things wrong, and but also be honest about what's the situation now. So I think that's the solution. Then your second remark, that was about COP21. As Prime Minister, I attended the climate summit in Copenhagen. I remember the palace very well. That was my first international conference, and then we were there in the palace, and we had the reception. We were invited by the Queen. And the dress code was dark suit. So all the prime ministers had dark suit except one. He received the wrong information about the dress code and he wore black tie. And then I said to him, what are you doing? Then already 3 people asked me to get a glass of wine. They thought he was a waiter. so you know, I know the palace of the Queen. When I was there in 2009, because of the climate summit, I arrived there on Thursday evening and we had a dinner. And then I thought, my God, what's happening here? The whole world is watching the leaders. It has been prepared. And when I asked my Minister of Environment, what are the results until now, she said, we are only discussing the procedure of the United Nations. Blocking decision making. It was frustrating. And I think, what I also noticed, the Prime Minister of China said, we want to do many things in the sphere of sustainability, but not on the basis of international binding agreements. And President Obama, I think personally, he would support the idea, but he was blocked by US Congress. And in fact, he had a disappointing summit. That was the situation. So I really hope, talking about Paris, that the preparation will be good. That's in any case the first lesson. You cannot expect that when people are gathering in Paris that they will find results. So the preparation is key. At this moment, I must say the arguments are a bit different. Sometimes I hear optimistic remarks, sometimes pessimistic remarks. So it's too early now to predict what will happen. What I hope in any case is that we lead to clearly defined conclusions for everyone. For that's a government responsibility. I also hope, and that's maybe also different compared to Copenhagen, that the private sector will be involved. We need the private sector as well. So if you have the right preparation, if you can draw the right conclusions, if the private sector is involved, that can be helpful. On the other hand, I must say I'm a bit concerned about the geopolitical situation at this moment in the world. The best moment I had as Prime Minister was the G20 meeting in London in March 2009. People said in those days, we have a huge financial crisis, we have to work together. President Obama said in the 30s, it took 12 years before we had a meeting, and now already within 8-9 months. We have to find solutions for the financial crisis, we must have a new financial architecture. And President Sarkozy said we must finalize the WTO debate within 1 year. And Pierre said we must make a success of Copenhagen. And 1 year later we had to draw the conclusion, we didn't reach those goals. So I really hope that we have another mindset. And we cannot wait, because the longer we wait, the more difficult the situation will be in the future. Fifth question, you spoke about China, you spoke about internet, you also spoke about rural communities. That was a bit of a question, rural communities. I think it's a very interesting remark. When I met Lee Kuan Yew a few years ago, I asked, what do you think about China? He said, well, China is a great country, a lot of achievements, but I'm concerned about corruption. That was one concern, and the second was inequality. Inequality between the coastal area and the hinterland, and also inequality in the coastal area itself. Rural community is important because we will see in any case the process of urbanization. Already now 50% of people are living in cities. That will be 70%. So you will see the trend that people will want to live in cities. That's what you see. Yesterday we have, the Prime Minister was there at the Center for Livable Cities, have given a speech about these issues. It's about the quality of life in cities. But talking about quality of life in cities, you also have to talk about the opportunities in rural areas and what's their mentality. I think you have to rethink the model of the rural areas. What can you do over there? Let me give some examples. In the Netherlands, we have the problem that after the financial crisis, many local authorities have a huge amount of ground. They have not property, but you can use it because nobody wants to invest. And now suddenly people say, well, let's use this ground for solar panels, for solar energy. Is this a solution? That's one. Second point, we have the problem in some parts of my country that you have not so many people. And now suddenly you can see that there are new ideas to bring people together to find solutions, etc. So it's a new innovative approach, just to be honest about what's happening now, but also to be creative in finding solutions. I already talked about rural communities. It's also interesting to see what can farmers do in the sphere of sustainability. We have beautiful examples. So I think it is possible to rethink the concept of rural communities, and it's good to do it. It's not only about living in cities, it's also about these rural communities. Sixth question was about the NGOs and their impact. You mentioned that issue. The thesis I've written in 1992 was about government regulation and civil society organizations. I'm always interested in the role of NGOs, because people are not just a voter for the government, or you're not just a consumer in the market, you're also part of entities, of NGOs, of groups in society. I think we need NGOs because it brings people together. They have their views, their convictions, but also they're essential in bringing forward new ideas and thoughts. For example, the Unilever company, they are talking with NGOs about their sustainability policy. More and more you can see that companies talk with NGOs about what are our sustainability criteria. Because you can have your KPIs, but they must be reliable. So therefore you must have a stakeholder dialogue. And I think in this field NGOs can play a very important role that counts on a national scale, it counts on a decentralized scale. It also is there when we talk about the global issues. So I'm really convinced that NGOs can play and have to play a very important role, and you must have the right dialogue between governments, NGOs, businesses, etc. I mentioned my PhD thesis, a nice story to tell. You will don't know that, but the official residence of the Dutch Prime Minister, that's called the Katshuis. The ambassador and the Dutch guys know that. Katshuis, that's in The Hague. And when I defended my thesis, my father discovered something nice. He was obviously, unfortunately, died in 2008. He discovered that the Katshuis, the residence of the Dutch Prime Minister, was built in the 17th century by a city architect, as we would call it now, in The Hague, and the man was called Klaas Dirkszoon van Balkenende. And then my father, he made a remark, he said, once there was a Balkenende who built the Katshuis, now it's time that the Balkenende will live in the Katshuis. So we laughed about the joke, but 10 years later I was Prime Minister. Let's tell a nice story. Last remark, triple helix. How does it work? And it was a very good question, because there are different goals. You have the short term and the long term. Talking about sustainability, the biggest risk is that we have silos. If governments are only talking about policy making, tax measures, etc., and if companies are only talking about profits, making profit in short run, for example, and NGOs are just criticizing everything, the outcome will be very poor. The reality is that if you want to be innovative, you need each other. And what we've seen in the past, let's say in the big cities, in early days, in the 60s and 70s, sometimes in some of these cities there was a kind of left approach. We talked about social housing, and not a friendly approach towards businesses. That's what I've seen in my country. This has changed completely. You must not only have social housing, you must also have houses for families. You must have businesses in your area. You must create jobs. And therefore it's better to work together. And what we can see in triple helix constructions is that the actors know to find each other. And when you are working together, it's not just let's come together and let's talk about it. No, the question is, what do we want to reach? For example, in the Port of Rotterdam, the authority of the CEO and then his board of the port, they say we want to have a sustainable port. And he knows that we must all have the startups in that area. And you must have the right cooperation with the authorities of the city of Rotterdam. But also, you must have the cooperation with schools and universities, because you need the people. And what I notice is that if you have a common agenda, if you're able to define what is necessary to realize, then you have a common agenda. And then everyone knows what you have to do or what you should not do. And that also can lead to bridging the gap between the short term and the long term. Because there is always a connection between the short term and the long term. The long term starts with acting now. But if you take steps in the short run, of course you must have perspective, because otherwise it can change the next day. That's not the right point. So there must be a connection between long-term goals and the steps in the short run. And the good thing of these regional triple helix construction is that people know how to find each other, and also to define a common agenda and developing your own goals, and that can really be helpful. So that's my view on how it works, and I think it's really successful. In any case, in my country it works. You can see it in many countries in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been speaking too long. But that's your mistake. You raised such fantastic questions, so it's always good to reflect on that. It was an honor for me to be here. I wish you all the best with your responsibilities and your capacities. It's always good to be in Singapore. I've given now several lectures at this university, and it's always great to be here. Unfortunately, Professor Kishore Mahbubani is not here. He's in New York at the moment. He also explained why he could not be here. He's a good friend. I remember the first time when I met Kishore Mahbubani, it was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I said, Mr. Mahbubani, Professor, may I introduce myself? I'm Jan-Peter Balkenende, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and I have to talk to you because of my mother. I said, what? Because my mother had seen an interview with Kishore Mahbubani on Dutch television. He was so enthusiastic about Mahbubani, he said, you have to read that book. Well, and every time when Mahbubani and I am together, he always talks about my mother. It's a strange situation. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you once again, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.